When she said the words open marriage, I thought it was a bad joke. But then I found the messages. And everything I believed in, fell apart in one night. This is the story of how I lost my wife, and found myself. In the beginning, Jason had always believed that marriage was a sacred bond, something that should last a lifetime. Growing up, he witnessed the unwavering love and devotion between his parents. Their relationship, seemingly perfect, shaped his ideals about love and commitment. He took those values into his own marriage with Laura, believing that they, too, would have a bond that could weather any storm. They met in college, opposites in many ways. Laura was outgoing and energetic, while Jason was more reserved. Despite their differences, they quickly fell in love. Their contrasting personalities seemed to complement each other perfectly, and together they envisioned a future full of dreams and possibilities. After graduation, they married, full of hope, and started a family with 2 beautiful daughters, Beth and Janie. For years, their life together seemed to follow a comfortable and predictable rhythm. Laura kept her maiden name, which Jason respected as a sign of her independence. They built a life that many would envy, a steady job, a home, and a family. Jason thought they were the ideal family, the picture of happiness. But that illusion began to shatter when he stumbled upon something that would change everything: his wife's infidelity. It started with a series of texts that Jason accidentally uncovered. At first, he didn't understand the gravity of what he was seeing. As he read through the messages, however, the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. Laura had been having an affair. It was as if the ground beneath him had crumbled, and he was left with nothing but disbelief and pain. For days, Jason could hardly think straight. He was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions: hurt, anger, and confusion. He had always thought that their relationship was unbreakable, but this discovery made him question everything. How could the woman he loved, the woman he had built a life with, betray him in such a way? The weight of the situation hung over him like a dark cloud, and Jason found himself struggling to make sense of it all. How does one reconcile the reality of infidelity with the ideals of marriage they had always held dear? As he grappled with the painful truth, Jason realized that he would have to make some difficult decisions. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, it was about the future of his children, and the person he had become. His sense of identity, which had been so closely tied to the image of the perfect family, was now in question. The life he had worked so hard to build with Laura was crumbling before his eyes. Yet, despite the emotional devastation, Jason also knew that he couldn't let the damage define him forever. He needed to find a way forward, for himself and for his daughters. With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Jason took the first step toward unraveling the tangled web of emotions, betrayal, and legal complexities that lay ahead. He would have to face his wife, confront the consequences of her actions, and ultimately determine how to rebuild a life that no longer resembled the one he once dreamed of. As Jason navigated the stormy waters of infidelity and divorce, his journey would not be easy, but it would force him to question everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and what it means to truly be a family. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. The discovery of Laura's affair shattered the carefully constructed world Jason had built. He had never imagined that his idealized view of marriage would come crashing down in such a brutal way. It all started with a random glance at his wife's phone. Jason had always been a trusting husband, never suspecting anything could be wrong. But one day, while Laura was in the kitchen, he couldn't help but notice an unusual notification from a number he didn't recognize. His heart raced as curiosity took over. He opened the message, and there it was, the undeniable proof of Laura's betrayal. The message was innocuous at first glance, just a few words exchanged between Laura and a man named Scott. But as Jason scrolled further, it became apparent that their relationship was more than just casual texting. The words in the messages were charged with intimacy, with plans to meet and subtle expressions of affection. His stomach churned as he read the contents, each line more devastating than the last. The final blow came when he saw the word love in one of the messages. Jason felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. The woman he had married, the mother of his children, had been hiding this secret from him for God knows how long. Jason sat frozen, staring at the screen. He couldn't bring himself to move, let alone speak. The weight of the betrayal was too heavy to process in that moment. His mind raced with questions. How could she do this? Was their entire marriage a lie? He tried to calm himself, telling himself it could be a misunderstanding. Maybe he was jumping to conclusions. But deep down, he knew the truth. The evidence was right in front of him. There was no denying it. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Laura's footsteps approaching the room. His heart pounded in his chest as he quickly locked the phone and shoved it into his pocket. He knew he had to confront her. The silence between them was suffocating. When Laura entered, she greeted him with her usual smile, but Jason could see through it now. Her eyes darted away from his, an unconscious sign of guilt that she couldn't hide. "Jason, are you okay?" Laura asked, her voice strained but too calm, too rehearsed. He stood up, his anger boiling over. "What's going on, Laura? Who is Scott?" Her face turned pale, and for a brief moment, Jason saw the fear in her eyes. But she quickly recovered, trying to mask the truth with a weak excuse. "It's not what you think, Jason. Scott is just a friend, nothing more." Jason's fists clenched. "A friend? You don't send texts like that to a friend." His voice was a mix of disbelief and fury. Laura hesitated, and for the first time, Jason saw her falter. The woman who had always been so confident, so self-assured, now seemed small and vulnerable. It was almost as if the weight of her own lies had finally caught up with her. She sat down, looking defeated. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. It just did." Jason could barely process the words. How could she be so casual, so indifferent, about something that had destroyed him? His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sadness, confusion, but most of all, disappointment. He had trusted her, loved her, and now everything felt like a betrayal. But as the anger simmered down, a different emotion took its place, a cold resolve. He knew he couldn't live with this, with the uncertainty, with the lies. It was time to face the reality of what had happened. Jason felt an overwhelming need to take control of his life again. He couldn't stay trapped in this web of deceit. The questions lingered in his mind. What should he do next? What was his next move in this chess game of emotional turmoil? There were no easy answers. But Jason knew one thing for certain: his life was about to change forever. And so began the long journey of unraveling the truth and facing the consequences of Laura's betrayal. Would he fight for their marriage, or would this discovery lead to something irreversible? What followed would be a series of painful choices, some of which Jason was not yet ready to make. But one thing was clear: the path ahead would be anything but simple. As the confrontation ended, Jason walked away with a heavy heart, uncertain about what would come next. The truth had been uncovered, but the real challenge was just beginning. The future of their family, and their relationship, hung in the balance. And Jason knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. The discovery of Laura's infidelity sent Jason's world spinning into chaos. However, the emotional turmoil didn't stop at the betrayal itself. It led him straight into the treacherous waters of legal battles. Divorce was inevitable, but what about the children? The custody of their daughters, Beth and Jamie, weighed heavily on Jason's mind. Could he protect his family from the damage caused by Laura's actions, or would he lose everything in the process? When Jason met with his attorney, the reality of the situation hit him like a wave. The divorce process was not as simple as he had hoped, especially when it came to the custody of the children. In Texas, the family courts typically favored the mother, and Jason knew that, despite his role as a devoted father, he would have to fight for his rights. The law was not on his side. As a man initiating divorce, Jason was looking at the possibility of losing the family home, seeing his children only a few days a week, and being forced to pay alimony. The emotional toll of the betrayal was one thing, the looming threat of a legal battle was something else entirely. Jason began to feel the weight of the system stacked against him. His lawyer, Kelly, was not only a skilled professional but also a calming presence in the storm. After listening to Jason's concerns, she laid out the harsh realities of the situation. The court would likely side with Laura when it came to custody unless he could prove that she was unfit to care for the children. It wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about the future of his daughters and the life he had built for them. Jason felt cornered. Divorce was a financial and emotional wrecking ball, and the fear of losing his children was the ultimate blow. Kelly offered a strategy to help him secure the best outcome: remain calm, document everything, and try to reach a settlement outside of court. But Jason, reeling from the shock of betrayal, wasn't sure he could settle for anything less than the life he dreamed of with his daughters. Could he really walk away with only the bare minimum? His resolve was tested when Kelly mentioned that an amicable divorce might still be possible, but it would require both parties to agree. The following days were a blur of legal jargon and emotional volatility. Jason knew he had to act quickly to protect his children from further emotional damage. But the more he dug into the specifics of the law, the more uncertain he became. Every decision seemed to carry immense weight. Was there even a way to undo the damage that had been done? As his lawyer prepared the necessary documents for the divorce, Jason couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope, however faint. There was still a chance that, despite everything, he could rebuild his life. But even as Jason fought for custody, Laura wasn't going down without a fight. The tension between them reached a boiling point when she tried to reach him through their lawyer. She wanted to settle the matter on her terms, but Jason couldn't shake the anger and betrayal he felt. As the legal negotiations continued, the stakes grew higher. Would Jason win the custody battle, or would the court side with Laura? Every move felt like a step toward either redemption or irreparable loss. The legal battle was far from over, and Jason knew that the consequences of his decisions would shape the future not just for him, but for his children as well. As he prepared for the next step in the process, one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. And with each passing day, the weight of what lay ahead grew heavier. But Jason was determined. No matter how painful the journey, he would fight for his family's future. Laura's betrayal was not just about the affair. It was the shock of how it unfolded, how her proposal for an open marriage shattered everything Jason thought he knew about his relationship with her. For years, they had built a life together, and despite the ups and downs, Jason always believed that their bond was unbreakable. But as he sat across from her, hearing the words come out of her mouth, everything he knew about love and loyalty seemed to unravel in front of him. It had started as a casual conversation about their relationship, one that Jason thought was just a way to air grievances, a discussion about their future. But then Laura had surprised him with her suggestion: an open marriage. She insisted that it wasn't about wanting to be with someone else but rather a way to spice up their relationship, to reconnect in ways that seemed impossible without drastic changes. Jason had been taken aback, unable to comprehend how she could want something like that after everything they had been through. It felt like a complete betrayal of their commitment to each other. Laura's reasoning was that she wanted to explore new experiences, perhaps hoping that this would reignite the spark that had dulled over time. She admitted that her desire to be with others was not an expression of dissatisfaction with Jason, but rather a way of finding herself. This rationalization, however, didn't sit well with him. How could someone who had pledged to spend their life together ask for something so extreme, so fundamentally different from the trust they had built? The very idea of her being with someone else shattered the foundation of his trust in a way that nothing else could. Jason, overwhelmed with a mix of anger and confusion, couldn't believe what he was hearing. How did a proposal like this fit into their lives? How could she not see the consequences of such a decision? His mind raced through a dozen questions, but the one that lingered most was, how could I have been so blind to her needs? The woman he had loved for so long, the one he thought he knew, was revealing a side of herself that he never expected. It felt like a betrayal not only of their marriage but of the life they had built, the future they had planned. The moment of realization left him questioning everything: his love, their history, and his ability to trust. Laura had always been the one to hold things together in their relationship, but now, he wondered if he had been blind to her emotional needs all along. Her proposal made him feel inadequate, as though he had failed to meet something deeper that she was searching for. Jason didn't know how to respond at first. Part of him wanted to shut down, to walk away from this proposal and never look back. But there was another part of him that wanted to fight for their marriage, to try to understand why Laura had gone down this path. The idea of an open marriage wasn't something Jason could easily accept, but he wasn't ready to give up on everything they had built together. Their conversation ended in an uncomfortable silence, each of them retreating into their own thoughts. Jason spent the next few days in a haze, trying to understand the implications of what Laura had suggested. Was their marriage doomed? Could he ever trust her again after what she had asked? Would their relationship ever be the same? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear: things had changed, and it was impossible to go back to the way things were before. As Jason tried to come to terms with the open marriage proposal, he knew that he had difficult choices ahead. The situation was more than just a betrayal, it was a pivotal moment in their relationship that could either mark the end of their marriage or the beginning of a new chapter. But the question remained: could they find a way to move forward, or had the damage already been done? Jason couldn't yet answer that, but he knew he had to make a decision soon, one that would shape the future of their family. After the shock of Laura's proposal for an open marriage, Jason found himself grappling with emotions he hadn't anticipated. The betrayal was not just the affair, it was everything that came with it. He had always prided himself on being a supportive partner, someone who listened, understood, and worked through issues together. But now, everything he believed in felt hollow. How could he have been so wrong about his wife? How could he have missed the signs? The first days after the conversation felt like a blur. Jason went through the motions of daily life, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The images of Laura and another man were vivid, making it impossible for him to focus. Yet, beneath the anger, there was a more complicated emotion: confusion. Was this his fault? Had he failed to meet her emotional needs? Jason began seeking advice from friends and a therapist, trying to understand how to cope with the trauma of betrayal. It became clear that the journey to recovery was not going to be easy. He had always valued trust in relationships, but now, he had to rebuild the most essential part of his marriage. The question was, did he want to? Could he even look at Laura the same way again? Every time he tried to talk to her, the distance between them felt wider, the gap harder to bridge. Therapy sessions helped him understand the root of his emotions. He learned that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes the foundation of everything a person believes in. For Jason, trust wasn't just about fidelity, it was about feeling secure and understood in the most vulnerable parts of life. But with Laura's actions, that security was shattered. He realized that forgiveness, while possible, required time, understanding, and, above all, willingness from both sides. Despite his pain, Jason still loved Laura. But his love now carried the weight of questions, uncertainties, and doubts. He found himself wondering whether he was capable of moving past the hurt. Could a marriage survive such a deep betrayal? Would they ever find their way back to what they once shared? As Jason pondered these questions, he decided to take time for himself. He spent long hours at the gym, took weekend trips to clear his head, and began rebuilding his own sense of self. While the road ahead was uncertain, he knew that his healing process would depend on regaining his independence, strength, and self-worth. By focusing on himself, Jason slowly started to understand that recovery wasn't about forgiving Laura right away, it was about healing his heart. He wasn't sure if their marriage would survive, but he was committed to understanding his feelings, processing the pain, and making decisions that were right for him. However, even as Jason worked through his emotions, he couldn't help but wonder what Laura was going through. Was she dealing with the same pain, or was she focused on something else? Would the time apart allow both of them to heal, or would it drive them further apart? As Jason continued down the path of recovery, he found himself questioning whether true forgiveness was possible, whether their relationship could ever return to what it once was. What did the future hold for them both? The answers would come, but only time would tell if they were meant to find a new beginning together. Divorce, while often seen as a personal matter, can have far-reaching impacts, legal, emotional, and practical, that touch every aspect of one's life. For Jason, the decision to file for divorce after Laura's betrayal was not a simple one, but a necessary step towards regaining control over his life. The legal aspects, from property division to custody arrangements, presented immediate challenges that required careful thought and expert guidance. From a legal perspective, Jason's primary concern was the financial settlement. Divorce settlements often include alimony and the division of marital assets, which can feel like a painful negotiation when emotions are still raw. He had worked hard to build a comfortable life, and now, the reality of dividing it with someone who had betrayed him weighed heavily on his mind. His lawyer, Mara, emphasized that understanding the legal framework of the divorce was crucial, as it would set the foundation for future negotiations. Jason had to come to terms with the fact that his life would be divided into pieces, some of them belonging to Laura, whether he liked it or not. Emotionally, the toll of divorce was even more significant. The grief was not just about the end of a relationship but also about the loss of the future he had envisioned. Every memory of their life together now felt tainted. Jason struggled with the thought of what could have been, what they had worked towards, and what they had lost. However, the emotional journey was not one of despair, it was about rebuilding. Therapy helped him understand that while he couldn't undo the betrayal, he could regain his emotional health by focusing on himself. This was not about erasing the past but about finding a way to heal, to redefine his sense of worth outside of the relationship. The practical impacts of divorce were equally challenging. Jason had to reconsider his daily routines, his finances, and